Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Glad to be here.
Today we're diving into the future of globalization, specifically how things look after the big shakeup from the COVID-19 pandemic.
Yeah, it's a massive topic.
We've got some interesting questions to guide us, and really the mission is to understand the key shifts, where things might be heading for global interconnectedness.
Makes sense.
Whether you're following this for professional reasons, maybe in global markets, or you're just curious about how the world's changing, hopefully this gives you something to chew on.
Right.
Okay, so let's get into it.
Well, the pandemic, it really threw a spotlight on vulnerabilities, didn't it? Especially in those global systems we'd built up.
Yeah, the supply chains.
Exactly. The sudden stops, the border closures, production halting. It was a pretty stark reminder of how fragile things could be.
And it felt universal, almost. Everyone seemed to have a story about waiting for something or not being able to find it.
Mm-hmm. That shared experience was quite striking.
So things have sort of settled down now, mostly.
Mm-hmm.
But the big question is, did those events trigger lasting changes? Are we thinking differently about global trade now?
I think the evidence suggests yes, definitely reevaluation. Our sources point towards, well, potentially long-term shifts in some sectors, moving away from that hyper-globalized model.
So not necessarily a full stop on globalization then.
No, probably not a complete reversal. It feels more like a significant adjustment, a recalibration, maybe.
Okay.
If you look at the forces at play, there's this growing tension, right, between nations wanting more economic resilience, that self-sufficiency impulse.
Right, wanting to control things more locally.
Versus the benefits we've always seen from free trade, from open borders for goods and services. Finding the balance there is critical.
It's a real balancing act, isn't it?
Yeah.
The pandemic definitely showed the risks of relying too much on faraway places.
Yeah.
But I mean, the economic growth and efficiency gains from the last few decades of globalization, they're hard to ignore too.
Absolutely undeniable.
But it's not just physical stuff anymore, is it? One area that seemed to just explode during the pandemic was digital globalization.
Oh, precisely. That's a key point. The huge shift to remote work, the continued boom in e-commerce, that's a powerful kind of global connection.
And it operates differently.
Very differently, often quite separate from the physical trade routes. And what's really interesting is how resilient that digital layer seemed to be, even when physical supply chains were seizing up.
That's a great point. Still, you can't really separate this from geopolitics, can you? International relations, power dynamics, they must play a huge role in shaping what comes next.
Oh, absolutely central. It's definitely not just an economic calculation. Geopolitical tensions, they can directly influence trade deals, where investment goes, how willing countries are to, cooperate economically.
Well, that influences company strategy.
Exactly. And that naturally leads multinational companies to rethink things. We're seeing signs, maybe, of more localization companies prioritizing producing goods closer to their actual customers.
Makes sense. Shorter supply lines, maybe more secure ones?
Potentially.
And a shift like that, well, it would obviously ripple through labor markets globally, wouldn't it? If
Yeah.
companies start bringing production home or just closer.
It would have to. And this ties into those newer terms we hear, like friendshoring,
Right.
which is about trading more with countries that share similar values or political alignments, and nearshoring.
Moving production to neighboring countries.
Yeah, relocating production closer geographically. These aren't just theories, they're active strategies being discussed to build more robust supply chains, but without, completely ditching international ties.
Okay, so if this is the direction, more localization, friendshoring, nearshoring, what does that mean for, say, emerging economies? Many have built their growth on being part of those long global supply chains.
That's a really crucial question, and probably without a single easy answer. The impact will likely be quite varied.
How so?
Well, some developing nations might actually benefit. They could become the new hubs for nearshoring, attracting relocated production.
Okay, an opportunity for some.
But others, especially those maybe heavily tied into very specific global value chains that get disrupted, they could face real challenges. A lot depends on how adaptable these economies can be.
So it really seems to boil down to this core tension, doesn't it? You've got this rising emphasis on national interests, maybe even nationalism, clashing with, or at least rubbing up against, the deep interconnectedness that globalization created over decades. Can those two forces find a new kind of equilibrium?
That is the multi-trillion-dollar question, isn't it? We're all
Yeah.
trying to figure that out. The pandemic was certainly a catalyst. It forced this global rethink.
Yeah, it pushed these questions to the forefront.
But the fundamental things that drove globalization in the first place, the search for efficiency, innovation, the potential for shared prosperity, those
Huh.
haven't just disappeared overnight.
Right, those underlying economic logics are still there.
They're still very much in play. It's about how they interact with these newer pressures for resilience and security.
Okay, so wrapping this up then. We've touched on a lot. Disrupted supply chains, digital acceleration, geopolitics, localization, friendshoring, the impact on different economies, this core tension with nationalism. As you listening, think about all these powerful forces swirling around. What single factor do you believe will be the most decisive in shaping the future path of globalization? It's all connected, of course, but if you had to pick one dominant force, what would it be?
That's a tough one to leave people with.
Something to ponder. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.